everyone to today's webinar on dynamic workforce management. I have three amazing speakers here today that I'll introduce in just a second. But before that, I will introduce myself. I'm Valerie. I'm head of content here at Multiplier, and I'll be moderating this session. And I want to think a little bit about a dynamic workforce. What is a dynamic workforce? A workforce that meets a business's needs, that blends full-time employees with freelancers, contractors, whatever helps you to reach your goals in the most efficient way, from a cost perspective, from a skill perspective, and that really helps, your business to thrive. I have a few numbers here I think can be grounding. In the US, the number of freelancers grew 90% between 2020 and 2024. That's from 38 to 72 million in just 4 years. And there are predictions that by 2027, freelancers will make up more than half of the workforce. So we're seeing this big shift in workforce dynamics already. And we've also seen kind of a shift in perspective and how people are thinking about freelancers in the workforce. Following a spate of layoffs in 2024, Fiverr conducted a survey in which 72% of respondents felt that shifting part of the workforce to freelancers would reduce the need for layoffs in the future. Kind of giving, is there a way, right, in which building contingent workforces can also build kind of stability as well? So I think all of these are really great questions. We have great speakers here to discuss them. We have Chris Morrow, founder and managing director of Digitalent, which specializes in AI and machine learning recruitment, helping companies to source top-tier talent for specialized and emerging roles. We have our very own Amritpal Singh, founder and president of field operations at Multiplier, leads global workforce expansion strategies, helping businesses to scale efficiently across borders. And Tim Nicholas, co-founder and CEO of Permhunt, who brings a deep expertise in tech talent acquisition, helping companies hire the best professionals from the Philippines for global markets. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to this discussion. And I think without further ado, we can just jump right in. I think the first question is, when you're talking about building a dynamic workforce, how do you choose? How do you choose, where does the dynamism come from? So how can you decide which roles are better suited for freelancers and which are better suited for FTEs, Tim?
I think first you got to look at specifically what role you're looking at, right, in terms of what you want to recruit for. There are roles which are generally dominated by freelancers, and there are roles which are generally dominated by full-time employees in terms of where does a top talent gravitate towards. Like, for example, in the Philippines, right, because I know the Philippines market best in terms of in comparison to other markets, right? I'm not saying that, I'm a global expert, but when it comes to marketing talent in the Philippines, for example, heavily dominated by freelancers, good freelancers as well, right? And it's just kind of the nature of the market. So it's very common for, an SEO specialist or a media buyer to, juggle multiple roles, and they're not so much, 1 hour here, 1 hour there. They're more so on a hybrid freelancer basis. It's kind of this weird dynamic where they might do 10 hours a week for a client here in Australia, or then 20 hours a month for a client in the US. So it really just depends, but that's kind of what the market looks like. And also it's kind of the same situation when it comes to video editors and also virtual assistants. So that's kind of the market. So if you are looking for any of these types of roles, then it's okay to go with freelancers for these positions, right? And then it also depends on, going into the other side of things, right? If you're looking for a full-time employee, you can find full-time employees for these positions as well. You just need to kind of pitch it a bit different. But if you're looking at other roles in, maybe different areas, so if you're looking at, maybe a full-stack developer, or you're looking at, someone full-time for HR, they're probably roles which are more best suited to basically choose as full-time positions and offer them as full-time positions with the appropriate benefits and get them on employee agreements like with Multiplier, because that's what the best talent are going to expect, right? So those are the kind of roads that you should be going down. So I think there are a few roles in which are super suited for you to go down freelance engagements. But for the rest, I think full-time is super important if you want to build teams which are dedicated to your business, invested in your business, and want to grow within your business as well. Because a large chunk of talent want to jump in, they want to get promoted, they want to learn new skill sets, right? Freelancers more so just want to earn some cash. They want to use they still learn, they want to use their existing skill set, but yeah, that's my perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like if you're looking for a more project-based engagement, right? You might go with a contractor, like a video editor, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. Chris, what is the role of skills-based hiring in creating a dynamic workforce? And what should your hiring approach be if you're seeking specialized skills, for example?
Good question. Yeah. So I would say that skills-based hiring is extremely important, particularly in specialised areas like the market that I exist in, my company, Digitalent exists in things like AI and machine learning and software engineering. The need for skills-based hiring in those specialised areas is, extremely high, and it's also very fast moving. A lot of the technologies and tools that we recruit for are sometimes tools that weren't even around sort of 12 to 18 months ago. So it's constantly moving, and there's a big sort of dynamic shift in terms of, how companies approach those types of roles when they're hiring, essentially. So what I would say is that it also depends really on where you're looking to hire for those sort of skills. So if we look at things from a sort of global perspective, you see, lots of different markets have lots of different approaches to skills-based hiring, and also how really like things like technology enables you to access that really broad, diverse talent pool. So, the companies really need to think about the location, I think, of where they're trying to hire for these sort of niche skills in specialized areas like AI and machine learning and software engineering, for example, because I think that there's quite often those types of thoughts from the hiring company's perspective, sometimes unfortunately is a bit of an afterthought. They'll sort of set the budget, pick the location where they want to hire, and then the actual skills seems to be sometimes a little bit of an afterthought. So for example, they might go to a specific area in the US, for example, that they're looking to hire really specific skill in things like, machine learning or software engineering, and the locality or the market that they've actually picked is actually quite thin on the ground with volume and quality of candidate for those specialist skills. So I always think it's better to do it the other way around. So before you actually pick the location, before you sort of get down into the weeds with it, you need to sort of do a little bit of a market map and understand, are those skills available in abundance? How much are these people sort of going to cost? And then try and fit that into your budget. Quite often, a lot of those things are already predetermined by the time companies actually get into things like skills-based hiring, which is unfortunate. And they often come to someone like myself with their hair on fire trying to sort those sort of issues out, which we then have to kind of unpick. So yeah, I hope that answers your question in some way.
It has answered my question, and it has given me two additional questions, if I may. The first is, I feel like we did an injustice here, which is we've talked about skills-based hiring, but I don't think we've actually fully explained it. So what can you say a little bit about what skills-based hiring would mean in this context?
Yeah, so skills-based hiring to me is hiring for specialist skills in quite niche areas. So for example, if you take software engineering as a part of technology, skills-based hiring within software engineering is all about hiring for, you know, specific skills and experience that relate to, let's say, a particular language or a framework, depending on whether you're hiring for like a front-end developer or a full-stack engineer, or whatever it is. And, you know, you're really focused on the sort of skills and experience, particularly in technology, on the technical level. So the sort of, you know, the languages and tools that people have specific experience of. It's probably the antithesis of what I would say is character-based hiring, where you are sort of hiring for character attributes. And obviously that comes into it a little bit as well. You're not just going to hire someone because they're an amazing software engineer if they don't have certain character attributes. So that's what I would probably say is how I would define skills-based hiring in that context.
Thank you so much for that clarification. And just one more follow-up here. You were saying that it's good to, before you choose a location, to kind of make sure you're looking at locations that have that, like the skill sets you're looking for, right? That are rich in the skill sets. How might you go about that?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is that quite often in my world, what a client will do is they'll make big, heavy-hitting decisions on things like technology, what, you know, frameworks they're using or what tools they're going to adopt, or you know, whatever, and then they'll sort of make talent an afterthought, in that, you know, they've already have their budgets defined and everything's already set. And then what they find is when they go into the market or they speak to someone like myself who runs an agency, they get to understand pretty quickly that there's either not enough people with that skill set in the location they're looking to hire, or they don't have the budget for those skills. And it's sort of like, that's what I mean by it being a little bit of an afterthought. So before those big decisions are made, I always think it's good to, when you know, people are sort of like doing the groundwork on whether or not they need to hire and what that hire looks like, whether it's a permanent member of staff, full-time employee, or it's a freelancer or a contractor, is to map out the market and do some market intelligence, for want of a better phrase. So that's something that we do quite quite frequently for our clients, is that we sort of help them to understand what the market looks like, how many candidates are out there, what types of companies they're working for. You know, a lot of the good places to do that is obviously LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a lot of functionality around that within their LinkedIn recruiter licenses, which are nowadays extremely expensive, and that comes with a tool called Talent Insights, which gives you an ability to sort of map out the market and see the volumes of candidates that exist for a specific job title in a specific location. And you know, you can also understand maybe not the salary information from that, but you need to really understand, or you need to speak to someone like myself who really understands that local market, so that you don't waste time in trying to recruit people, you know, way off budget or things like that. So I think it's always good to map it out, using things like LinkedIn, using specialist recruitment agencies to really understand the playing field before you start making those kind of big decisions. And like I said to you, quite often it's an afterthought. These big decisions are already made, and then what they're trying to do is they're trying to sort of take a budget for a skill that doesn't really exist in a great deal of volume or quality in a specific location that they just have to hire in, and then they try and, you know, sort of ram a square peg into a round hole, which often becomes really expensive and frustrating for the companies that are doing the hiring.
That makes a lot of sense. Research. Amrit, what are the cost implications of hiring freelancers versus full-time employees, both in the long term and the short term?
I just wanted to touch upon a topic that is quite important. One is what are the key constraints when determining what sort of engagement model an organization needs to apply with an individual. Unfortunately, we come from a compliance mindset. And the key component is that, smaller organizations can get away with arranging individual contracts with people across the world without tax authorities looking too deeply into their finances. They are unlikely to be audited by your typical local regulators, and as a result of which they are able to engage with freelancers across the world and make payments to them. Second aspect around that is that in a variety of countries, governments do not necessarily speak to the banks that receive money on behalf of individuals. So two major trends that are going to arise from this is, firstly, yes, everybody wants to go with a bit of a flexible workforce. Then the second major trend that is also happening in the back end is that individuals cannot receive money willy-nilly from a variety of corporations across the world. So what do we do about that? So I think one of the biggest push, and Tim, you rightfully pointed out about Philippines. The Philippines tax authorities do not speak to the Philippines banking ecosystem. So it is okay for someone to continue to be a freelancer for an extended period of time because they don't necessarily need to submit their taxes on that. In another market like United States, your 1099 kind of contracting models are so familiar and common, and shall I say, the government systems are so evolved and mature that it's not only easy for people to submit their taxes as an independent contractor, but also the banks do speak to the tax authorities. So you have very little opportunity for non-compliance. So the major thing is that all governments across the world will sooner or later start interfacing and interacting with the local banks, such that the non-compliance will slowly have to be weeded out. And if you were to observe another aspect is that your SMEs can get away with paying a whole host of freelancers across the world, which is what Upwork and Fiverr have really leveraged that trend over the last 5-10 years. But once you're an enterprise and you've got auditors looking through your books, government authorities looking through your books, then there is no room at all to directly engage with an individual other than one via an agency. So that's where you see a whole host of marketing agencies also, shall I say, contracting with an agency, because the smaller agency is then able to host a whole ton of freelancers to essentially get work done. So that is where the major trend comes from. In terms of the very niche roles, again, that also comes about with the scale of the development and the scale and size of an organization, and what are the jobs that need to be done at that hour, and that part is something I don't necessarily have plenty of insights on. I know I can speak on behalf of Multiplier. We try to find a lot of folks for very specific skill sets in marketing or sales or technology, product, etc. And in that setting, we don't have much negotiating power on where that person will be based. It will have to be wherever that person decides to be based. So the ball is typically in that court. I hope I answered your question, Valerie, or did I just completely talk about whatever I wanted to talk about?
You did what we call in marketing a pivot, but it was a really good pivot. So I'm not going to penalize you for it. I like what you're saying, Amrit, about these two kind of intersecting trends, like the growing emphasis on a flexible workforce, and also the dicey compliance angle.
Government's catching.
Yeah. I've got something to add to that, Valerie, if it helps. So I completely understand where you're coming from there, from the compliance angle. Another thread that's probably worth pulling at with regards to this question is speed. So a lot of my clients, they hire freelancers and they hire contractors compliantly and quickly when they go through a recruiting agency, a staffing agency like ourselves, because we're the ones who actually payroll and, you know, so allow them to become sort of compliant. Now that restricts them somewhat in terms of the location of where we can payroll those individuals a lot of the time. But the other thing that these companies that our clients they like from a freelance and contractor perspective, the fact that, you know, a lot of these resources for these types of projects, whether it's specialist or not, they're quick to hire and they're quick to fire, in the sense that, you know, when you're looking to hire someone on a permanent full-time basis, that person in the US is obviously at will employment, which we don't have in the UK. We don't have that in Australia. And sometimes, you know, to hire a permanent member of staff in places like the UK or Australia, it can take you 3 months because that person has a 3-month notice period. So it's really, really slow and drawn out. So the speed is one aspect of it. The other thing that the companies really like here is the fact that those resources, they don't sit in CapEx, they sit in OpEx. And that is really important because it's a completely different cost center. And they like that, especially bigger organizations, because I've recruited for some really big organizations in the past, like Barclays Bank, big global bank, for example. And they loved switching off that CapEx tap and switching on the OpEx and treating those resources as non-headcount services-based type resources type thing. Big publicly listed organizations also like that as well, because they can hide headcount and they can boost their profitability in that sense as well. So the speed angle is a big thing in terms of thinking about how long is this going to take us to hire someone as a full-time employee versus how quickly do we need the resource. Is it just for like a 3-month project? Is it for like a 2-week project? Is it for 6 months? Is it for 12 months? I think all of that comes into it, as well as obviously you know, what you were saying with regards to compliance, which is obviously really, really, really paramount to organizations, especially in making sure that they are, you know, staying compliant from a tax perspective and, you know, from all sorts of, you know, legal perspectives as well. So I just thought I'd add that in there from a slightly different angle from my own experience, if that helps.
Yes, I think that's a really useful insight. I have more thoughts about this, but I actually need to keep us moving because we see we're 25 minutes in and we're a quarter of the way through my questions. So I'm going to move us right along to building a contingent workforce. We're going to talk a little bit about the logistics. What does that really look like? Chris, back to you once more. How can businesses find high quality? Well, we sort of addressed this maybe in the first portion of this. How can business find high quality freelancers? And I think you were saying, like, you know, to be led really by the skill rather than by having preconceived notions about geography or where you ought to be hiring. Does that feel true?
Yes, I would say so. Certainly in our markets where we're dealing a lot on the sort of like bleeding edge of technology, so to speak. So yeah, you really need to be led by the availability of those skills in a specific geography, as well as, you know, the budget for that as well. You also need to, I think, pay special attention to areas in the world where it's just not that often that you find people who are willing to do contracting. We've got a client at the moment that we're dealing with in Spain, for example, and for a really niche skill within artificial intelligence and things like AI and machine learning engineering. And, you know, you speak to 100 people and 98 of them don't want to be a freelancer because of the sort of cultural differences associated with what that means, and things like the rights for, you know, employment rights for people in Spain, for example. So I think you need to give special attention to that. It's not really just as simple as saying, oh, we need to hire for this skill, so and therefore we're going to hire a contract in that location. You really need to truly understand the market And that goes a level deeper than just the budget or the availability of skill. I think you have to understand culturally, are freelancers an attractive option? You know, you mentioned at the start about it being attractive in the US, and we certainly find that with our US clients for sure. It's such a growing, abundant, buoyant market for contracting, but it's not like that in every single location around the world, you know.
I think that's such an important point.
Can I understand? So, in your opinion, Chris, are the Spanish labor laws coming in the way of free and open markets?
I don't know if it's the Spanish labor laws coming in the way, you know, because obviously Spain's part of the EU, and the labour laws make it quite difficult from the limited knowledge that I know about the Spanish sort of labour laws, and we don't recruit in that area very often, but we're doing it right as of this second, so I thought it would be pertinent to talk about it. It's actually quite difficult to fire a permanent member of staff, which makes it attractive for the candidate to become a permanent member of staff because it gives security. And it makes it more difficult for the company who's looking to hire a freelancer to actually attract people who are willing to do it. So that's the cultural difference that you're talking about there. People would much rather, I think, in my own experience, or you know, in the last several weeks when we've been talking to people about this, they'd actually prefer to earn a little bit less money as a permanent full-time member of staff and have that security than potentially a little bit more money as a contractor or a freelancer. And it's actually the opposite a lot of the time in places like the UK or Australia. You know, people would sometimes, as long as the market's buoyant enough, they'd much rather be paid a lot more per day. In the UK and in Australia it's per day, whereas in the US it's obviously per hour. So it's that's another sort of nuance and difference to sort of consider as well. You know, so I think it's really all of it you have to consider together, you know, and that's what makes hiring globally at the drop of a hat, if you're doing it yourself, so difficult, because there's a lot of pitfalls and there's a lot of things to catch you out in that journey.
I'm based in Spain, actually, and so what you're telling me about punitive freelancer laws is like really resonating, and I think it's it's interesting because it makes it a bad location to be hired from an outside organization, because I understand that the taxes for employers in Spain are some of the highest in the world. I think you pay up to 40% of your FTE's salary in taxes. So it really is, you know, I'm not going to get into like the macroeconomics of it all, but also possibly why salaries in Spain have been stagnant for so long. Who knows? But at the same time, you have also punitive, like a full-time or freelancing system, which makes it like, then that tax burden actually gets passed on to freelancers. So freelancing is really unattractive. Full-time employment is very attractive. And it kind of has weird implications for outside businesses looking to hire here. And anyway, I don't quite know what to say about it. I wonder, Tim, I know you're specializing in the Philippines. Have you seen, is there some sort of, what's the situation there? How easy is it to hire freelancers versus full-time employees? What are their cultural reservations? Like, I would say in Spain, nobody wants to be a freelancer, but it's happening more and more because of like global hiring and outside companies absolutely refusing to pay those taxes.
In the Philippines, the freelance or contractor market is booming, and it's booming because of a few reasons. Number one, there's just a lot of demand from the US. So about 85% of the freelancer demand is actually from the US. And it's coming from a few different industries, mainly. Number one is marketing agencies. So they're the marketing agencies based in the US. So they're the ones who are providing the most demand for freelancers in the Philippines. Number two are actually startups. And number three are businesses in the e-commerce space, right? So amongst them three industries in the US, they are providing approximately 250,000 new opportunities per year in the Philippines. So, yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. You know what? I just wanted to build up about that for your information, Tim. If you look at the employer taxes, just wanted to explain a little bit more about what Valerie said. So, for instance, in Spain, if you offer someone, 5,000 USD employer contributions on top of that, the company will fork out close to 7,500. If you're talking about Australia, you add approximately your payroll taxes, I think about 10 to 11%, thereabouts. And then in US, it's about 10 to 13%. If we look at Philippines, it's actually it's below 2%. It's a very tiny number. So actually, the government over there it's doing its level best to try to facilitate formal employment and to get that done. But the employee burden is also not fully worked on, simply because, as you pointed out, which I totally see still, is that the banking systems don't speak to the tax authorities, and that will change in the next few years. We know for a fact, for example, India took a very drastically different stance approximately 2 years ago, and that eliminated a whole ton of folks who were happily freelancing for companies across the world.
Amrit, can I just ask a quick question on that? With regards to those the Spanish tax side of things, does that still apply to employers who are non-resident of that location? So, for example, if you've got like a UK company hiring Spanish, yeah, right, okay. So that explains a lot then in terms of the sort of market intelligence, yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the UK, your national insurance is only 11%. Companies find that fairly reasonable. And then you knock off whatever is just taxes below that. So, if you think about ultimately, the equation that needs to land is, hey, company takes out 10,000, how much reaches the chap's bank account post taxes? Yeah. That is essentially the amount of efficiency or inefficiency that a country is able to drive, and that's where you have a lot of formal or informal labor market participation.
Right.
Tim, if you take the Philippine example, you take it to South America, over there is insane. Over there is like extremely punitive to participate in formal labor, because the government is literally taking 60 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, we had a freelancer in Argentina, and I think because it was like 100% inflation in the country at the time, they preferred to be paid in US dollars and all of that sort of stuff. So
yeah, so absolutely. So if you talk about formal labor participation, your exchange rate is very big component, because more often than not, a lot of locals may not fully be confident in their own currency, and then also what is the amount of cut that the government is taking on the transaction.
This part of the webinar has gone a little bit off the rails, and I'm trying to bring it home. What have we learned? There are very specific laws in different countries which make it either more attractive to hire freelancers or FTEs. Both from an employer's perspective and from an employee's perspective, right? Where, as Amrit's saying, if you're based in South America, you want to be a freelancer. Or if you're based in the States, which has like so few labor laws to begin with, there's not, or so few federal labor laws, I should say, but like there's so little difference between being a contractor and being an FTE. It's also very attractive, right? So there's, I think what I'm hearing, and it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. So thank you all for this, but what I'm hearing is, wow, it's different everywhere, and you have to stay on top of it or work with specialists, because it can be difficult to say which is going to be the best option depending on where you're hiring. I'm going to move us on to section 3. We're managing a team of freelancers and employees. Okay, so let's say you found the right kind of contract for the right kind of person in the place that they are. You've given a Spanish person a full-time contract. They're delighted. You've given a person based in the Philippines like a freelance agreement. They're delighted. And now you're managing them. Chris, how can companies ensure institutional knowledge retention when they're relying heavily on freelancers?
This is a big issue that's probably not talked about enough, to be honest, especially with the short-term nature of a lot of these sort of contracts. So what we see with a lot of our clients is that they have processes in place that allow that sort of like knowledge transfer to happen during the course of that contractor being with the company. So for example, often when you see hybrid teams, for example, that are a mix of permanent members of staff and contractors, especially in what we do with regards to AI machine learning, those contractors are often highly skilled and maybe come with a greater level of seniority or skills than potentially they have on a full-time basis permanently within their own teams. So they often get buddied up with a permanent member of staff, and that person then works through a sort of knowledge transfer with them before they then roll off their contract. And the way that that's done is through all sorts of different types of communication tools, or maybe project management tools, to sort of glean some of that specialist knowledge from them and make sure that they're not walking out the door with the sort of IP side of things of whatever they've built, but they actually work with the full-time members of staff and sort of to try and almost sort of like train them up on those sort of specialist skills. And that's a lot of when you're coming to the tail end of those types of contracts, that's where a lot of the work is done to really upskill, or try and upskill as much as possible, mentor and coach and develop some of those full-time members of staff. And that's normally how we see it happening in our clients across the US, UK, and Australia.
The key element is, as Chris pointed out, is, what is the duration that you need the skill sets for? As soon as one has identified, whether it is a long-term engagement or a short-term engagement, it will then give a lot more insights into how best to take this, how to take it forward. In terms of getting people to productivity, it really depends more so on onboarding and stuff rather than the contracting. I think contracting is no longer a challenge simply because of, because of Multiplier. It's easy to deploy folks within 5 to 7 days in like pretty much 100+ countries on any type of engagement contract, be it a fixed term 3-month contract, 12 months, or an indefinite term contract, with all compliance taken care of. So it really depends on that. In terms of the speed to productivity, almost always, remote roles are always going to take a little bit longer, simply because, it's very difficult to get engagement over the internet versus face-to-face interaction, no matter what people say. But I think the ultimate reality is that, some roles are just too niche for companies to be picky about, and it would really depend on where a person is located.
Great. And looking at you, Tim, how can businesses ensure that no cultural disconnect occurs between freelancers, employees? I mean, let me think about that question, because I feel like, of course, there's going to be a bit of a cultural disconnect. How can you kind of make contingent workers, make freelancers feel like a part of your team without, them actually literally being a part of your team?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a bit of a tricky one. So I think a lot of it comes down to the fundamentals, right? So I think number one, using open communication with your freelancers, and kind of doing your best to really understand where they come from, what their situation is like from a personal perspective, and then also a professional perspective. And then what would also help with that is their experience in working with your team, right? So that'll help foster, I'd say, a better relationship and better integration as well, to kind of prevent those cultural disconnects. So, kind of being aware of the personal situation, depending on the country that they're in, they might be supporting a few other family members. Situation, what else is LA, right? So there's a few different elements that come into play, and we can just keep it, keep it basic. If we want to kind of ensure that we want to kind of minimize the cultural disconnect between freelancers and employees.
Great. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, you guys.
Can I add something? I think, again, as I was trying to share, the freelancer FTE disconnect exists because of so many other factors, i.e. the country labor laws, how tight the banking is, how punitive the labor laws are in a particular market. The major distinction that I think you were referring to was whether someone should be a part-time or a 40 hours a week. Part-time employees are very difficult to engage with because they are just committing a portion of their time, and whether they are on a fixed, on a formal employment agreement or a totally ad hoc one is outside of everyone's. Based on so many other factors, but every organization wants their staff to be deeply engaged with their company. And that's why, going back to Chris's point, it really takes so much of effort from the organization itself to buddy people up, to get people as engaged and productive as possible.
What I was just thinking about? I was thinking, even when I have freelancers, I always get that. This is a very silly tip, but here's one. Whenever I have freelancers, I always get them on Slack. I cannot work with somebody if they're not on Slack with me. If we're corresponding over email, like, I don't know you, I've never met you, and this relationship isn't going to work. So I feel like creating integrations seems like something that is really important. Even even when I enter very short-term relationships, if there's somebody I need to iterate with, work closely with, making sure that we have that easy connection. The tip from your moderator. Okay, so how can you build your workforce in a more agile way is the question that we're all asking ourselves. Okay, because we have these budgets. God knows we have these budgets, and we have to spend them wisely, and also meet the needs of a growing business, meet the needs of our team, and save money for other projects and initiatives that we're excited about. So how can we be agile in our approach? How can we make sure that we're getting the skills that we need while also staying flexible so that we can address things as they come? I'm thinking we skipped the first step. What does workforce agility mean in this context? That would be my question for you. And I'm playing hardball with you, Amrit.
Workforce agility is a very fanciful word, speaking about company agility. Company agility, with respect to the resources and resource planning, has to go hand in hand with essentially putting butts on seats and getting work done. Now, if you're talking about company agility and workforce agility from a management lens, then it would be, how can I ensure that work gets done the fastest, and removal of inefficient or unproductive resources with the minimum amount of noise. So I think that's where, if you're talking about tools that facilitate that, then getting butts on seats in the fastest, quickest way possible, then could maybe be referring to Upwork, Fiverr type solutions, in which you are going out to market saying, hey, I need this done, and you have a whole host of people who come in and say, I can do this, and company decides, and then once the resources are working or not working, the decision making on how to remove resources in the quickest way possible with the least amount of noise then comes with actually understanding the compliance implications of disengaging with individuals, because 99% of labor law problems come with terminations and severance kind of elements. So having a deeper understanding on the compliance parameters actually allows one to be a little bit more agile in managing the workforce. I hope that helps.
I love it. I love it. I really appreciate it. Like workforce agility, boiled down to butts on seats, getting work done. And it's real, Amrit. It's real. We use a lot of work jargon, but I appreciate your ability to cut through it always.
I was looking at it behind you, Amrit, and that background, and it made me think of an analogy of like a speedboat versus an oil tanker, and that in the sense that you are, when you're a big corporation and you're really not flexible a lot of the time, and there's a lot of bureaucracy, and even though projects move very fast and demands change, sometimes your company and therefore your workforce isn't as agile as it could or should be, and that hurts the company. And then looking at the other side of that, when you're a speedboat, you're a small organization and you just need a skill and you need it like now. You can get that in today's world, whereas sort of like 15, 20 years ago, you couldn't. So that's what I was thinking when you were asking that question. So.
No, but that's also it. I feel like that's also, because I was thinking too, like the quote or the number that I pulled at the top of this webinar that about respondents feeling that there would be reduced layoffs with a higher investment in freelancers, actually came from like a report saying that that most companies doing layoffs, it was like 74% of companies doing layoffs, like survey respondents said they had no plan, right? It's just like you get in, you're like the numbers are not, this math ain't mathin', right? We need to cut costs now, but there's not like a really good kind of plan for how to then restructure that workforce in a more resilient and flexible way, which is what you're saying, Chris. One that's more responsive, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I think that's really like the beauty of a dynamic workforce, you guys. I think we've cracked it philosophically. Can I hit you with the same question, Tim? Not the same, but like how is it that that companies can adapt their workforces to meet shifting demands? How can they stay agile? What is your read on this scenario?
Yeah, so I think there's various elements in which a company can engage with to stay agile when it comes to workforce agility. Number one is to identify when it's needed or when it's possible to hire a contractor or a freelancer. Like if you need a specific skill set, like for example, Clay. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Clay, clay.com. It's a new and upcoming lead enrichment tool, which a lot of SDRs are using at the moment. And it's a very complex tool as well. And to find someone with the skill set to be able to build out certain tables within the software is very rare. So like if you want to get work done quick and you want to reach out to prospects fast and in an agile way, you need to be able to reach out to these people who have the skill sets. And to do so, you need to jump on Fiverr, you need to jump on Upwork if you want to find those people. And you need to make sure that your team are aware that they can utilize freelancers, that they do have a budget for these kind of projects, these kind of tasks, so that they can, they don't have to spend the time maybe learning the skill set themselves. They can engage with a third party to do so, right? So that's number one. Getting your team very familiar with AI and all things AI as well, super important. There's so many ways in which it can be utilized at the moment. to save time on various different types of tasks. It's becoming very prominent in the recruiting world as well, as you would know. And yeah, I think AI is a super important one, because it can free up so much time to bring on other people into the team, to have them accomplishing high level tasks. So hope that answers part of your question.
It does, and it brings up another kind of cheeky question, but I would feel remiss to have two recruiters in my very midst without asking it. What's up with AI in recruitment, y'all? just a bonus, but can you opine for me? Are you using it? I'm sure you must be, but tell me, how is it impacting your life? Is it coming for your job? I don't think it is, but tell me. Go ahead.
Do you want me to go? I'll go first. Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously, being a recruitment or the owner of a recruitment agency who specialise in AI, I've got a sort of dual viewpoint on that. And I think what a lot of people often don't realise about AI in general, and that's not just AI that sort of recruiters or recruitment agencies use, or even the candidates themselves, is that it's not just about reducing headcount and therefore replacing people's jobs. There's a whole other side to the coin, which I think doesn't get the news and doesn't get the sort of people talking about it, which is a lot of companies are using AI at the moment to maintain headcount, but actually increase productivity. So they're not necessarily using it to reduce people's job roles as such at the moment. In fact, there was a statistic that I came across the other day when I was doing one of my videos on LinkedIn, and that was that 4% of people who are using AI assistants like ChatGPT and Claude, only 4% of them are using it to do 75% of the tasks that are involved in their role. So that's a really, really low number, and that shows you that there's hardly anybody out there at the moment that's really using those sorts of AI assistants to completely replace human beings in that sense now. So that's the first thing I would say about it, is that it's a lot more of a complex thing. Not complex, so it's a lot more binary, really, when you think about what AI is and how it's used. In my business, we use it for, I probably use Claude as my favorite. Claude 3.5 Sonnet is my favorite AI assistant for things like writing, doing a lot of strategy work. It kind of gets my tone of voice and allows me to sort of like brainstorm with that a lot better than some of the other AI assistants like ChatGPT, for example. And that's another thing, you sort of use different AI assistants for different tasks, really. The big problem, I think, that recruitment agencies, and Tim probably understand this as well, and hopefully back me up on it, is that the data side of a recruitment agency is an absolute mess, right? It's out of date. People, sort of some recruiters like doing what we call admin and updating our system. Some of them don't. So the data within a recruitment agency is actually really, really poor, in the sense that it's incomplete. It's not structured properly. You can't really use it to glean a lot of insights from. So I think recruitment agencies are going to really, really struggle to grasp AI and its full power until they sort of unlock that part of the puzzle. But I'm an AI recruiter in that I recruit for AI roles for my clients, but I'm also trying to make my business into an AI first business as well. And I'd probably say I'm an intermediate stage at the moment in that journey, and it's really, really complex. So I'm not replacing any human beings in my company just yet. That's a long way off, I think.
Yeah, I think once AI tools get specifically better at a very niche and narrow thing, than maybe a human is, then it will come into play. But I think at the moment, I think there's still a long way for any sort of significant replacement for a recruiter. For us, what we use AI for is all of us use it for writing, right? So for doing emails, tidying up the emails, making it more concise, or even just giving it a bunch of dot points from a call from a client, and just just fleshing out what that follow-up email is going to look like. Number one. Number two, what's also really interesting is that we started using AI. We've developed our own CV parser using AI, which is using Claude, Anthropic, to actually parse the CVs in a more accurate way that our current ATS does. Our current ATS was getting a lot of misses, right? They weren't identifying a lot of candidates with certain specific skill sets or missing keywords, whatever it is, because maybe it was a PDF, maybe it was some people uploaded their file as a Word document or a Pages document, whatever it is. It wasn't being super accurate. So we've now developed our own CV parser, which didn't actually take us long to do, which is going to help us tremendously in terms of keyword identification, to be able to reach out to more candidates who are applicable. And overall, with more accuracy, we might not have to rely on as many Boolean searches anymore. And also what we are also using AI for at the moment is outreach. So personalization at scale, especially. So for prospects and also for candidates, we're able to take in the candidate's information, all the prospect information at scale, no matter what it is, write a personalized line and make it appear that a human has wrote it.
I'm so glad we did this AI addendum. Thank you guys so much for your time. This has been a wonderful learning experience. And thank you all for tuning in to this webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did.